My name is Amber Frell. I'm 25 years old. At 6:40 a.m. on Christmas morning, my mother ripped my stocking off the mantel, threw it into the fireplace and spat. "You've ruined every Christmas since you were born. We never wanted you here." My father slammed a trash bag of my clothes against my chest so hard I hit the wall. "Finally," he growled, "pack your stuff and get the hell out of our house." My sister stood on the stairs filming it all, laughing. "Good luck starting over, loser. No one in this family is going to miss a worthless burden like you." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took the small walnut box my grandfather gave me 9 years ago, walked out into the snow, and drove to Northern Trust. The bank manager locked the door behind me, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Miss Frell, sit down. What I'm about to show you is going to change everything your family just did to you. Before I tell you how my grandfather destroyed them from the grave, hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Let me take you back to that morning properly. I woke at 6:32 a.m. to the smell of cinnamon coffee, the kind my mother made only on Christmas morning, ever since we'd moved into my grandfather's house when I was 15. For 10 years, that smell had meant ritual, the signal that the family was performing. This morning, underneath it, I heard too many footsteps for 6:32. My father's boots, my mother's slippers, something heavy being dragged across hardwood. There was already a suitcase in the middle of my room. I hadn't put it there. 3 taps at the door. My mother's quiet voice, the one she used when she didn't want my sister to hear. "Sweetheart, get up. We need to talk." I'd heard that voice the night before through the kitchen wall, telling my father, "Just keep it short. Don't let her cry her way out of it." She walked past me to my dresser and started pulling clothes out and dropping them into a 30-gallon trash bag without folding. My grandmother's cardigan went in the same way as my underwear. Behind her, my father stood in the doorway. Brad Frell, 53, plant foreman at Cherryland Furniture Mill. He hadn't looked at me directly in 2 years. He stared at the wall above my head, then stepped forward and slammed the bag against my chest. The family portrait from 2018 fell off the nail and cracked face down on the carpet, the one I wasn't in. "Finally, pack your stuff and get out of our house." The most words he had spoken to me in 3 years. My mother pulled me toward the stairs by the elbow, lit up, not with anger, not with fear, but with the brightness of someone who has finally reached the end of a script she wrote a long time ago. The Christmas tree glowed by the window. 8 feet of balsam, fat-colored bulbs my grandfather had used since 1972. She walked to the fireplace and ripped my stocking off the mantel, the white one with silver thread my grandmother had stitched my name into, the one I had hung on that mantel every Christmas since I was 15, and threw it in the fire. It went up fast. The lining was synthetic. For 1 second, the smell was almost like the cedar dust in my grandfather's cabinet shop. The silver thread caught last, and then even that was gone. Then it wasn't. She turned to face me, expression calm. "You've ruined every Christmas since you were born. We never wanted you here." My first thought wasn't, how could she? It was, of course. She'd been saying it sideways for 25 years. She had finally found a stage. 4 stockings left on the mantel: Cheryl, Brad, Kelsey. Tanner, my sister's boyfriend, a man I'd spoken to maybe 11 times. His name was on the mantel. Mine had just turned to ash. Kelsey came down the stairs. 22, 80,000 TikTok followers, already filming. "Hey besties, this is real. This is happening live." She didn't look at me when my mother handed me the bag, not when my father unlocked the door. Only when she angled the phone to catch my face in the frame and laughed. "Good luck starting over, loser. No one in this family is going to miss a worthless burden like you." I had socks on, no shoes. The cold hit my legs first, then the bruise already forming on my chest. I picked up the walnut box from the bottom step where I'd set it the night before. I'd carried it downstairs at midnight, almost without thinking, like my body knew before I did. I stepped over the threshold. The snow came up to the tops of my socks before I reached my car. I closed the door the way my grandfather had taught me to close cabinet doors when I was 8 years old. Quietly, all the way. They thought silence meant I had nothing to say. Silence was the first thing my grandfather ever taught me how to use. Let me tell you about my grandfather. His name was Roy Holloway. Born in 1946, he built cabinets for 40 years out of a one-room shop on 8th Street in Traverse City. The shop smelled like cedar and shellac and burnt coffee from a percolator older than I was. Sawdust settled on the windowsills in a fine, pale layer every morning and had to be wiped before customers could read the samples. He wore a leather apron with a horseshoe-shaped burn on the right side, a piece of walnut that had popped off his lathe. He never replaced it. He said the burn meant the apron was working. When I was 8, my mother started dropping me off at his shop in the afternoons. My sister was already in 3 enrichment programs. I was in none. My grandfather would meet my mother at the door, take my backpack off my shoulders and say, "We have work to do." Never to my mother, always to me. He gave me pine and 120 grit sandpaper. Sandpaper goes with the grain, sweetie, always with the grain. People are the same. I sanded pine for the next decade. The summer my grandmother died, Marlene Holloway, June of 2015, a stroke at the kitchen sink, my mother decided we should move in to help. We'd sold our small ranch in Acme Township for $182,000. My grandfather had a 4-bedroom house he had built with his own hands in 1971. He cleared out his office for me and my sister. He moved his workbench into the corner. The first night, I heard my mother in the hallway. "Just hang in there. He's 70, maybe 5 more years." I was 15. When I got up an hour later, my grandfather was standing in the hallway in his gray flannel pajamas, a glass of water in his hand. He had heard it first. He had been standing there longer than I had been awake. He stepped aside so I could pass. The next morning, he asked me to come to the shop on Sundays. I went every Sunday from that summer until the week before he died. In May of 2016, my mother slapped me at a Memorial Day barbecue. She had lost a bracelet and announced to 15 guests that I had taken it. When I said I hadn't, she slapped me. My grandfather was at the grill 20 feet away. He set down his tongs, walked over, looked at my mother for a long moment and said, "Amber, come help me with the grill." He never raised his voice. He never explained himself. But after that, he started asking me different questions. "What do you want to do after school? Who do you trust? Do you have money in your own account?" I didn't. The following Monday, he drove me to Northern Trust on Front Street and sat beside me while I opened my first checking account with a $100 bill he'd folded into my jacket pocket. "This is yours," he said. "Not the family's, yours." My grandfather died in December of 2016, a cardiac event at his workbench, exactly how he would have wanted to go. The morning after the funeral, my mother told me the house would go to her as next of kin. "Your grandfather was a simple man, but smart enough to leave things to family that would take care of them." I said nothing. 3 days later, I got a call from Gerald Whitmore, an estate attorney on Union Street. He asked me to come in alone. I went. He slid a document across the desk. Roy Holloway had drafted a revocable living trust in May of 2016, 1 month after the barbecue. The house at 818 Cherry Bend Road, the lot, the shop inventory, a savings account I didn't know existed, all of it in trust, with me as sole beneficiary upon his death. My mother received nothing. Gerald explained that the trust allowed my parents to continue living in the house, rent-free, he specified, in exchange for standard upkeep. My grandfather had written in that he believed his daughter would need time to come to terms with the arrangement, and that he wanted to give her that time. The house was mine. Their occupancy was a courtesy. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a brass key on a simple ring and a note card in my grandfather's handwriting. "Any time, any reason, any hour, Roy." I went home. I said nothing. My mother found out 3 weeks later through the county clerk's website. I heard her on the phone. He was manipulated. Toward the end, he wasn't himself. The attorney she called told her there was nothing to contest. The trust had been notarized, witnessed, filed. My grandfather had also included a no contest clause. They stayed. They did not contest. And they started charging me rent. Not formally, no lease. My mother called it contributions to household expenses. $300 a month, then $450 when she enrolled my sister in an online program she said benefited all of us. It was my house. I was paying rent to sleep in it. I paid it for 8 years. Sit with that for a moment. 8 years. I watched my mother run the household as though she owned it, tell guests they'd had some difficulties with the estate, but things were settled now, while my sister grew up believing the house belonged to our parents. In October of last year, I made an appointment with Gerald Whitmore, same office on Union Street. I brought the trust documents, 3 years of bank statements showing the monthly transfers, and I asked him what my options were. He didn't pause. Your options are excellent, Miss Frell. Your parents have no lease, no legal tenancy. They are guests in your home, and you are allowed to ask guests to leave. I asked, can they fight it? They can object. They cannot win. The notice was delivered by mail and in person on December 1st, 24 days before Christmas. It gave them 60 days. My mother called 4 times that day. My father called once. I answered none of it. What followed, the calls to relatives, the framing of it as my having snapped, the claim I'd been manipulated by an attorney, I heard through my Aunt Margie, my grandfather's younger sister, 71 and sharp, the only person who had known about the trust from the beginning. She called me December 10th and said, "He talked about you every Sunday, you know, every single Sunday." I sat with that for a while. My mother ignored the notice and did not begin packing. My father left one voicemail asking to discuss a reasonable transition. I didn't call back. I listened to it 4 times. On Christmas morning, they delivered their answer in the way you've already heard. I drove to Northern Trust in my socks, with a bruise forming on my sternum and the walnut box on the passenger seat. The branch manager, Lisa, had been notified in advance by Gerald's office. She locked the front door, the branch wasn't open yet, and slid over the trust documents and account statements. My grandfather's savings account had grown. When I saw the number, I didn't say anything. Lisa gave me a moment. Then she said, "Is there anything you need today?" I said, "I need to know when the lockout can happen." Gerald's office coordinated with Leelanau County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Daryl Hawthorne was assigned. The lockout was scheduled for December 26th, the day after Christmas. A detail not lost on me. At 9 a.m., I drove back to 818 Cherry Bend Road. My parents' cars were in the driveway. My sister's too. Deputy Hawthorne met me at the end of the driveway, and we walked to the door together. I knocked. No answer. I used the original brass key, the one from the walnut box, the one my grandfather had carried on his belt loop for 43 years, and opened the door. Within 2 hours, 3 adults had left the house with what they could carry. Deputy Hawthorne was patient and professional. He did not raise his voice once. Neither did I. My mother said one thing before she left, standing in the doorway with a box of kitchen items. She looked at me and said, "You are not a Holloway." I thought of my grandfather in his gray flannel pajamas, standing in the dark hallway because he had heard what his daughter said and had chosen to stand quietly between her and me. I thought, "You're right, I am." They rented an apartment in Beulah, 40 minutes south. 1 bedroom, 3 people, no fireplace. My mother had insisted on a fireplace when apartment hunting. She had to settle. I learned from Aunt Margie where the money had gone. $168,000 to Cherryland Academy for my sister's tuition. $22,000 to a salon my mother tried and failed to open. 3 Las Vegas vacations, never with me. $8,000 to an influencer's apparel project that produced 0 t-shirts. By the time of the lockout, they had $31,000 in checking and a 401k my father couldn't touch for 5 more years. The apartment deposit took half the savings. My sister lost 4 brand deals in 7 days after her live stream. A skincare brand director's email made it to Reddit. "We're not comfortable being associated with the events depicted in your recent live stream." Her boyfriend broke up with her by text 6 days after the lockout. 9 words. "This isn't the brand I'm building. I'm out." He unfollowed her on every platform within 40 minutes. By the end of March, she had moved back in with my parents, 4,200 followers on a new account, sleeping on the pull-out couch. On March 4th, my mother texted, "We did our best with what we had. One day you'll understand. I did not reply. On March 21st, my father sent the first message he had ever written to me of his own accord. Amber, I know you don't owe me a reading of this. I am writing it because I owe you the writing of it. I should have stopped your mother 30 different times in 25 years. I did not. I am the kind of man who does not stop things. I know that now. I will not contact you again unless you want me to. I am sorry. Not because I expect it to change anything, because it is the only true thing I can give you. Dad. I read it 14 times. I did not reply. But I did not delete it. On March 28th, I drove up Cherry Bend Road one last time. The snow had melted. Deputy Hawthorne was waiting on the porch with a new set of keys. Welcome home, Miss Frell. I shook his hand. I unlocked the front door with the original brass key and stepped inside. Empty. They had taken what they considered theirs. The fireplace was clean and cold. The hardwood floors my grandfather had laid in 1972 were still there. The faint smell of cedar was still there under everything else. I set the walnut box on the mantel where my stocking had been. The first week of April, I climbed to the attic with a flashlight. The air up there was dry and still, smelling of pine boards and the tannin of old wood. In the far corner under the eave was a cardboard box labeled in my grandfather's handwriting, Amber 2020. I opened the flaps. Inside were 5 things. The first was a Christmas stocking, soft cream wool, my name embroidered along the cuff in red thread, slightly uneven, the way embroidery is when an old man with shaking hands does it himself in the evenings without telling anyone. On the inside cuff, 4 small letters stitched in, Amber 2020. The second, third, fourth, and fifth things were small walnut boxes, exactly like the one he had given me when I was 16. Same dovetails, same hinges, lids inlaid with a thin border of cherry. He had made 4 more. 4 backup houses, in case the first one was not enough. I knelt on the attic floorboards in the cold and the dust and held the stocking against my chest. And for the first time since I was 8 years old, I cried the way you cry when you are not afraid of being heard. I cried because he had been making stockings for me since the year I had learned to stop crying. He had stitched my name into wool in the evenings, while my mother had stitched a different kind of story about me into our family. He had been working in silence, 1 floor below her, against her. And I had not known. Every time my mother told me I had ruined every Christmas since I was born, every single time, he had been downstairs with a needle in his hand, building me a Christmas that did not depend on her permission. I carried the box down. I hung the stocking on the mantel. I left the 4 backup walnut boxes on the workbench where I could see them. I pulled my grandfather's workbench out of the corner and set it back in the middle of the room, the way it had stood before we ever moved in. I laid out his chisels in size order, the way he had taught me when I was 9, shortest on the left, longest on the right, handles all facing the same direction. I tied on his leather apron, the one with the horseshoe burn. I am not a cabinet maker. I will probably never be. But I will learn the way he taught me. Sandpaper with the grain. Always with the grain. People are the same. One last thing. My grandfather did not save me. People will want to say he saved me. That is not quite right. He prepared a door and left it where I could find it when I was ready. The hand on the doorknob on Christmas morning, in my socks, in the snow, was my own. What he did was the thing only love does. He did it 9 years before I needed it. He saw what was coming. He drafted a trust. He signed it with a contractor's pencil. He stitched my name into a stocking I would not find for half a decade. He put a key in a walnut box and told me, any time, any reason, any hour. And then he kept that knowledge for 9 years without telling me, because he did not want me to have to choose between my mother and the truth before I was ready. The world will sometimes try to make you feel like a burden. The math will sometimes look that way. That is not love's math. Love's math is quieter. It is being on the second floor when no one is watching, with a needle, in the years before the storm. Some people don't make a key for you on the day you need it. They make the key years in advance. They keep it in a drawer. They wait. If you've ever been the quiet one in a loud family, listen. The people who love you don't always say it. Sometimes they sign the deed. Sometimes they stitch your name into wool. Sometimes they spend 9 years building a door and put it where you can find it when you finally have to walk through one. I'm Amber Farrell. I'm 25 years old. I live at 818 Cherry Bend Road, in the house my grandfather built with his own hands in 1971, left to me in 2016, and handed to me by way of a brass key in a walnut box on the coldest morning of my life. I have a fireplace. I have a stocking on the mantel with my name embroidered in red thread. And I have a door. The door he built for me before I knew I would need one. I closed it tonight.